Now remember, when you're presented to His Highness, be sure...
Wait! Please, wait for me! Isn't it lovely? Do you like it? Do you think it will do? Mother, she can't. No, you can't.
Girls, please. After all, we did.
And that makes me turn the TV off. That made me turn my eyes off when I was standing in line. I'm like, this programming is just really overwhelming. But I would have to say that that is the white perspective. Everything that's considered normal, from a Band-Aid. I remember being little, and the Band-Aids were flesh. They came out with the flesh-colored Band-Aids. So I put it against my skin, and I'm like, this doesn't. I don't remember what thought I had until I was older. But I remember being bothered by it when I was older, and I had did my own shopping, and I'm looking at these Band-Aids and flesh-colored, invisible on your skin. And I'm like, do I not exist? I mean, maybe I shouldn't be buying Band-Aids. Maybe I should just get a rag, because you're telling me that this is the color of flesh, but I'm not that color. So what does that make me? What does that do to a little black child who gets a Band-Aid and is flesh-colored, and that's not the color of their flesh? So does that mean they're not human?
What would you rather have? If you had the choice, what would you have? Would you have black hair or blonde hair?
Blonde hair.
And then, what would you rather have? Black eyes or blue eyes?
Blue eyes.
Blue eyes.
So it's just a constant assault. Psychological warfare is what it is. And it is so intensive and so relentless and so systemic that I don't even think white people notice it half the time. Unless, of course, you bring it up. And they know what you're talking about, whether they deny it or not. But that's what I would consider the white perspective. It's everything that you're exposed to that says white is normal. Not white is not normal.
If you live in a world, as we do, where you turn on the television and you see a TV show and the crack dealer is always a black guy and the judge is always a white person,
or if the only time you ever see a black man is on the evening news and he's being arrested. Yeah.
Those images start to matter. They start to change the way the software in your head works. And that's
regardless of what race you are.
Regardless of what race you are. So, I mean, my mother, who is black, sees the same images in the world, positive images of white people and negative images of black people, as a white person does. Mm-hmm. She can't escape that reality.
Wow. Again, context of white supremacy, and I would just throw in, I think white people would notice if it changed. If you went to church and white Jesus looked like John Amos from Good Times, white people would notice immediately. If those flesh-colored days, if you could buy one and Dick Gregory could put it on and it would be invisible, white people would be upset immediately. I guess I need to go for younger generation. So if Lil Wayne could put it on and it would be invisible, the Band-Aid, white people would be furious.
Yes, indeed.
Furious.
Absolutely.
You talked. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. When you talk to black people and you say, well, you mentioned the color of Jesus and that, and they'll say something sometimes inane like, well, what difference does it make what color Jesus is? And I said, well, you go into a white church and say that. You go into a white church and bring a black Jesus and see what happens. They respect themselves enough to at least want to worship somebody that represents who they are and what they look like. So you go into a white church and try to bring a black Jesus and see if they'll tell you it doesn't make a difference.
Home field advantage. Home field advantage. It's the equivalent of if the Lakers and Celtics are playing basketball, it would be the equivalent of going to Boston wearing a Lakers jersey. I mean, it's home court. It's just not supposed to happen. This is white supremacy. White is supposed to dominate at all times. You talked about the psychological ramifications of this. On page 137, white identified black people, these people are psychologically suicidal. And you write, by viewing the world through white eyes, white identified blacks are in the unenviable position of embracing their own inferiority and abnormality and have no choice but to be anti-black and anti-self. If the white identified black is observed interacting with whites or blacks, he or she will eventually reveal their own racial bias and inferiority complex by the things they say or do. The confusion comes from trying to straddle the precarious line between the black world and the white world by serving two opposing masters at the same time, white supremacy and black normalcy. It is unnatural and perverted for a race of people to adopt a perspective and a set of standards that does not benefit their group and defines their own normalcy and self-worth as members of that group. Unfortunately, this kind of distorted thinking is exactly what has led to the personality disorders and self-hatred issues that plague the black population. Could you expound on that, please?
Well, I can give you an example. I was in a grocery store one time, and this black lady was talking. She may have been in her 50s, talking to this white lady, and I was just happening to be, over here, and I was listening to what she was saying, and she was basically talking about those bad kids coming from the city. The black lady was some of the bad kids coming from the city, and how they not raised right, and they the blah blah blah, on and on, stereotyping these poor stereotyping black kids to this white woman. And I probably shouldn't have done that. And so I did inject myself into the conversation. And I asked her, I said, well, you're comparing a school system that's based on real estate taxes deliberately so that the black schools are inferior. So, of course, the black children are going to have an inferior education and not going to be prepared to come into your school system. And so the white lady, when I started talking about the way the taxes, like, I don't know if it's that way in your state, but in our state, the property taxes supposedly fund the school, the quality of the schools. So if you're coming from a more affluent area, of course your property taxes are higher, i.e. your school system will be superior. So they deliberately fund it that way, and that's what I was telling her. When I said that, the white lady got this look on her face like, I don't want to be part of this conversation anymore, and she walked away. So I told the black lady, who was a little bit old, who was somewhat older than me, and I said, don't you understand that when you put black people down, when you're talking to a white person, that when you walk away, you're in that same boat. You haven't extricated yourself from that. You actually, they don't look at you and think, well, that's a good black person. You're basically condemning yourself. And she surprisingly, she didn't get real mad at me or anything because I really was out of order. But she said, oh, no, when they see Miss So-and-so, they don't think that way of me. So I don't know whether or not anything I said made any difference to her, but it's this whole idea of trying to separate ourselves. I'm a better class of black. I'm a better black person, And so I've seen black people do it constantly, and I've done it myself, is say the things that you think will make white people take you out of the category of inferior blackness. But little do you know, white people aren't that stupid. They know that's what you're doing. They like you to do it. This is my opinion. They like you to do it because it reassures them that you are still holding them as the standard. So you're not even thinking about white supremacy overturning it or overthrowing it. You're actually participating in it and supporting it and endorsing it. So they like to see you do that, but they're well aware of what you're doing. So, and they're not taking you out that category, even if they tell you something like, why can't more black people be like you? They haven't taken you out that category, because if they saw you as a full human being, you would not be in that stereotyped conversation. In other words, it wouldn't even occur to them to say that to you any more than they would say it to a white person. They wouldn't have a conversation with a white person and say, why can't more white people be like you? So right then and there, when they make these statements to you, you know that you're being stereotyped, that you're already in that black boat. So I guess the whole thing that I would say about it is that it's very easy to fall into that trap of trying to separate yourself from the inferior black masses. But what the only thing that does really is teach you to secretly have more contempt for yourself, because there's no way that you can separate yourself from the black masses. Education won't do it. Professor Gates found that out. With his Harvard degree and teaching at Harvard, he was still treated like an ordinary you-know-what when the deal went down and that white policeman decided he wanted to have a little fun. He wasn't the professor from Harvard anymore. He wasn't the professor who used to be married to a white woman. He wasn't a professor with all the degrees and all the accolades. He was just another black man. So it doesn't matter if you decide you're going to separate yourself. You're not going to be allowed to separate yourself. Whenever it's that time to remind you of what you are, they will gladly and willingly do it. So it's just a very, very psychologically dangerous position to be in. I'll just end on that, to try to separate yourself and create a false reality. It's very, very psychologically dangerous.